You're right, of course. He did stop eventually. That first night was rough, though. He thought a belt was the best way to get information out of us. At least his arm got tired quickly. He missed after a few dozen strokes, and I started laughing. I just laughed, and of course that made him angrier and angrier. But then he missed again, and that just made me laugh even harder. All I thought about when he was going at me was that you got away, and it wasn't so bad. I sort of just shut off, and I was even able to sleep eventually when he was done. The next day wasn't too hot, though. He made me work, the bastard, said Heather, smiling wanly. You're a strong one, you know that, said Averly, smiling at Heather and wiping away tears that had formed in the corners of her eyes. Averly reached into her shirt and brought out her pouch and cupped it in her paw. Here, let me give you something so that you've got your head start to getting away from him, said Averly. Averly divided the coin she had in two. Heather looked up at her, wiping away her own tears with one finger. You sure, Fleadip? That's a lot of work you put in, you're giving up, said Heather. Sure thing, Shutterbug. But you've got to do your best to help the others if you can get them away from him if they want, said Averly. I don't think the others really want to get away from him. He's really not that bad to them as he was to us, said Heather ruefully. Averly nodded and handed the money over to Heather. Heather took the money with both webbed hands and pocketed it. It jingled as it slid into place. Averly looked down at her feet for a while before looking back up at Heather. Did you hear anything about Henry at all? Asked Averly, shuffling her feet. Heather looked perplexed and twiddled her forefingers against one another for a moment. The last thing I heard, he was traveling east to study some ancient sunken city. Something about the artifacts there being very valuable to sell or something, said Heather. That's good to know. Thanks, said Averly. Heather smiled up at her. Do you want to come and meet my new friends? I have so much to tell you, said Averly, clasping the locket with her right paw reflexively. Heather frowned. I would love to. You know I would, but I can't. We came in here to work and we're on our way out. The fellows are waiting for me outside, and I've just got to get going. They're probably already impatient for me as it is, but how about this? Let's agree to meet up when we can. When I figure out a way to get away from this mean old air and his underlings, you and I can meet up and catch up and dish on all how our lives went and what we've accomplished, said Heather, her lips curling downward. Averly teared up again, realizing that she likely wouldn't see Heather again soon, if at all, hugged her in close one last time and let her go. Yes, Shutterbug, let's do that. I'll find you. Just remember that I'll always be able to find you wherever you are. Let's make a pact to meet up when we can in the future, said Averly, furiously wiping away the tears from her eyes. Heather swallowed hard. Sure, sis. That's the plan, said Heather. Heather gave Averly one last hug, walked to the door, and was gone. Averly walked to the basin and wiped her eyes with her paws. She composed herself and cleared her throat, making sure she looked like she had when she entered the bathroom in the first place. Finally, before she left to head back to her friends, she smiled. The sadness she felt looked out above it, but she kept smiling nonetheless, turned and went back out to the hallway and up the stairs. Averly found the group in the middle of a heated discussion with the new arrival. Samuel waved her over. Come here, Averly, and meet Rowan, said Samuel, beckoning with one arm. Averly walked into the room and made her way to her seat and sat back down, slumping slightly before relaxing into what she thought would be a natural sitting position. Averly smiled at the new mouse, her eyes still watering from the meeting with Heather. Rowan smiled back just as his glass of ale and bowl of stew slid over the arch behind him and came to rest out in front of his paws, which accepted them as though they had been waiting for them the whole time. He pulled his spoon from the stew, blew on it, and took a mouthful of it, his smile deepening. Hello, Averly. It's nice to finally meet you. I've heard you're a magic user. Are your studies going well? Asked Rowan, as he chewed slowly, enjoying his meal. Averly stammered slightly, silently caught herself, and responded, Oh yes, I'm having a wonderful time learning all that I can from all the spells that I've been given. The runes are hard to figure out at first, but I've already got my first spells working, and I'm excited to see what else I can get to work. Maybe I'll be able to get something as fancy as all this going one day, said Averly, waving her arms toward the bar below them all. Rowan smiled at her. One day, perhaps. It took Ro a long time to get his timings right. It wasn't just a matter of getting the spells to work, but also a matter of getting them to cycle correctly and where to get them to fire so that they worked in unison seamlessly. He really is an artisan when it comes to that sort of thing, said Rowan. Rose looked up at Rowan. Mr. Rowan, that's the most I've ever heard you speak, ever, I think, said Rose. Rowan eyed Rose thoughtfully, then swooned another mouthful of stew into his mouth. Probably is, Rose. Also, you may as well call me Rowan from this point, said Rowan, chewing and wiping his mouth with the back of his paw. Rowan took a sip of his ale. As he placed his glass back on the table, a series of bowls and glasses slid along the wooden rail between Rowan and Barkley and split between their recipients, the bowls steaming and the glasses of amber and ruby liquid twinkling in the magical gas lamp light overhead. Cutlery wrapped in bone-white napkins trundled along behind them and laid down and placed next to each bowl. That was quick, said Barkley, licking his lips. Barkley grabbed his napkin and unfurling his cutlery and began digging into his meal. The others did the same. Rowan finished his meal while the rest of the group started theirs. He sat quietly while they ate, watching them, sitting motionless, but enjoying their company nonetheless. He'd been watching them for so long that he had grown fond of them, and it was nice to finally get to eat with them all. When they were nearly done, he tapped his spoon against his glass. "Quiet down for a moment, will you?" asked Rowan. The group stopped eating, placing their silverware down on their plates, and stared at the mouse that sat before them. "Good, thank you. You may be wondering why I'm here right now and how I even know who you are," said Rowan, smiling at Averly. Averly smiled back, looked away momentarily, then caught his eyes fully. "The truth of the matter is, when you're sent out from Missile Hop, you're given guardianship. One of us is tasked with making sure that the group makes it to Marlin's tomb and gets back safely," said Rowan, leaning on the table with both paws. The group shared a look of shock. "You mean you've been following us this whole time?" asked Rose, incredulous. She was furious at the invasion of privacy, at the thought of not being trusted to complete such a basic trek to a silly old tomb and back. And then she thought about how they had gotten distracted in the forest and ended up in a completely different city and were probably headed to an even entirely different place after that in search of animals they had never even met, and then the idea of being followed to be protected by one of the town's elders made a little more sense, though it did nothing to reduce the feeling of indignation of being followed had created. Rose decided she would be having some very strong words with her mother the next time she saw her, crossed her arms and let out a huff of air. "Unbelievable," said Rose. "Not really," said Rowan. "We've done it for a generation, and it's something that keeps our young safe for years. We usually don't even let them know about them being followed, but your group is special. When you suddenly disappeared in that forest, Jedediah decided that you were to be brought in on the ritual a little early because we were in need of a few of you to do some things for us at a later date once you've taken care of your current obligations, that is," said Rowan, finishing his drink, and tapped it twice on the tabletop. It slid away from him and up the rail towards the center of the bar below and disappeared from view. "So you've been relaying everything we've done to our families this whole time we've been away?" asked Samuel, scowling at Rowan from across the table. "Well, yes, of course I have. That's my job, Samuel. It was a lovely tram ride, though, wasn't it?" said Rowan, smirking. Samuel clenched his fist. "That doesn't make it okay that you've been following us around this whole time," said Samuel, incensed. "No, it doesn't. But it's what we do for the betterment of our town, and it's something you'll likely be asked to do, so you can learn to handle the outrage, or you can age quickly being bitter by it, if you like. It makes no difference to me, to be honest," said Rowan. "I'd expect you ought to take the better option, though, as we have more important things to talk about." "Like what?" asked Parkland. He had remained quiet throughout Rose and Samuel's outbursts, watching them and studying Rowan. "There is a great and growing danger coming from the east, from a long ago buried city. It's an old magic, and its power has been growing steadily for the past few months. It's been dormant for years, but lately it's been increasingly active, and we think it's been amassing followers for something drastic to come. We also think that that's where the Amber Stones were taken, if our intel was correct," said Rowan, folding his paws together and placing them before him on the table. "You think that's where they've been taken?" asked Averly. Rowan nodded. "Seems to be, from the information we've gathered. See, we did some looking into those rams while I trailed you, and the family history while you were out and about in the town. It didn't take long to find out who they were, and it wasn't hard to overhear the conversation you folks were having behind the house in the forest. So we put the Alverns onto researching them," said Rowan. "Mom and Dad?" asked Parkland. "You mean they were able to help you?" "Of course. Voracious readers, those two. Happy to help us. Gets their minds off the tavern and worrying about you as well, I think," said Rowan. Rowan stared at Parkland intently. "Where do you think you got your intent to read, boy?" scoffed Rowan. Parkland balked, unable to say anything of merit, and then smiled sheepishly. "I suppose my parents taught me," said Parkland. Yes, they did," said Rowan. "You're a lucky one." Parkland smiled. "Yes, I am," said Parkland. "As I was saying, if you pull out your map book, Parkland, I can mark out your needed travel towards Sunken City and where we think they may be hidden. We'll do our best to make sure you have as much information as possible as you possibly could before you head out. But if they're there, you should be able to find them and bring them back to their family here," said Rowan, pointing to the satchel around Parkland's neck. Parkland moved his plates to one side, which were empty, and then cleared themselves away from the table and folded napkins skittering across them along behind them, along the rail leading away from the group. He reached into the satchel around his neck until he felt the familiar cloth inside of the book that contained the maps that they needed, and he pulled it out. Parkland rifled through the book until he got to the appropriate pages, flipped the book around, slid it over, and laid it open-faced in front of Rowan across from him. "Here you are," said Parkland. Rowan squinted at the page. I always need my plastic spectacles when it comes to print, said Rowan, pulling out a pair of square glasses and placed them on the bridge of his nose, pushing them into place with one finger. All right, so you're here in Tanzania, said Rowan, pointing with one bony finger at the town drawn in semi-detail on the map. Rowan traced his way to the right along the path through a decrepit forest marsh and ended with a series of crosses representing the ruins of the ancient town in the middle of the desert sands. Ezerland ruins, scrawled in deep red ink, sat over the ruins. With one fluid movement, Rowan pulled out a blue pencil from his pocket and circled the red lettering. That's where you need to be headed. There's a series of catacombs there, said Rowan, leaning back in the seat. Rowan's drink returned to his outstretched paw, which he raised and took another long drink. He placed a silver coin in the ruined circle on the table. It stood up on its edge, twirled and rolled down the rail towards the bar. Excellent service, that, said Rowan, placing the drink down in front of him, smiled, and hiccuped. It was then that the group realized that the mouse was slightly tipsy. Jedediah has said that I'm to come with you, so you've got some protection for this, said Rowan. The group looked at one another. That would be most helpful, considering we have no idea where this place is, said Barklin, still staring at the mouse. I just showed you, didn't I? Asked Rowan, frowning at Barklin over his glass. How long will it take us to get there? Asked Rose. Rowan sat quietly over his glass mug, thinking. About a week or so. We've got to get through the marshes first. A lot of bogs and dangerous sands to walk through, not to mention the dying forest. It's pretty for a while, but then it gets sparse and stagnant, and finally it starts to get dangerous. Then we should be able to find the old town. I think it'll take about a week to get there if we travel at a proper pace, said Ron. It must be pretty far away to take a week of travel to get to. Can we take a carriage part of the way, or do we have to walk the whole way? Asked Averly. Walking, I'm afraid. There aren't any roads that are worth traveling down into the forest, and since we're heading into the marshes, I doubt that any carriages companies would travel into them for fear of getting stuck and losing one of their precious vehicles. Better we walk and travel lightly. You're young. It won't be too bad. Anyway, I'll be able to teach you a few things most nights if you like, young lady, said Rowan, pointing to Averly's locket. You're a magic user? Asked Averly, surprised and somewhat delighted at the news. Of course. How else would I be able to let the others know of what was going on so quickly, said Rowan. He held up his left paw, which held a gold band with a red oval gem laid into it. Averly stared at it and held out her locket with one paw. Rowan eyed it before raising his glass once more and taking another long drink and placed it back down in front of him. The others continued to finish their meals as they spoke. As they ate, the door that opened to the stairwell below swung outward, and Rose stepped out into the room. He walked to the table and came up to the group. How is everything? Are you enjoying your meal? Asked Rose. He was smiling wildly. Oh, yes, the food is lovely, said Barklin. The rest of the table agreed. Rose stopped a moment and counted the number of occupied chairs with one finger, coming to rest on Rowan. Did you add a member to your party? Asked Rose cheerfully. Oh, yes, said Samuel. Samuel motioned his arm towards Rowan across the table. This is Rowan, said Samuel. Rose smiled at Rowan. A new friend, asked Rose. An old one, said Rose, smiling up at Rose. Rose clapped his webbed fingers together and smiled an even wider smile. Even better. Pleasure to meet you, Rowan. Please let me know if you need anything, said Rose. Rowan, who had been nursing his drink once again, raised his head. There is one thing I need to ask of you, if you're able, said Rowan. Rose raised an eyebrow and smirked at Rowan. Sure thing, said Rose, pulling up the last empty chair and sat down between Rose and Averly. What do you need, my new friend, said Rose. We're going on a trek through the marshes to Ezerland, and we could use help finding the proper supplies for our travel across the sands, if possible. It's the first time for these younglings, said Rowan. Rowe bent back in his chair and rubbed one webbed finger across his chin, thinking, Ah, my friend, you're in need of things to get you through the winds and dust, and to fight the effects of the sinking sands if you're unlucky enough to step or fall into them. I think I'm able to help you with this. Let me find the proper channels, and I'll contact Jeffries at the house, and he'll be able to get you to the right animals tomorrow. You should be able to find everything you need within the next day or so, I think. Is there anything else you need to plan for? Asked Rowe, his eyes questioning the small mouse. Rowan stared back at the toad unblinkingly. We'll likely need medical supplies if we find the amberstones. They'll probably be banged up and in need of basic medical care, said Rowan. Rowe nodded and lowered his arm to his lap. That's easy enough to get sorted, said Rowe. Oh, and supplies to last over 2 weeks of travel in case it takes us a little longer to get there or get back from our destination, said Rowan. Barklin finished his drink, tapped his mug twice on the table in front of him, and the mug slid down the table and over the rail towards the bar. He watched it go. Do you think they'll be hurt badly? Asked Barklin, turning back to Rowan. There's no way to know, but it's best to be prepared if they are, said Rowan, sipping from his glass once again. If that's all you need, that shouldn't be a problem, said Rowe, getting up from the table and pushing his chair back up against the table's edge. If you need anything else from me, let me know. I'll be downstairs helping out the customers. If not, please enjoy the rest of your night here, and it was a pleasure meeting you all, said Rowe. Thanks for all your help and the wonderful meal, said Samuel, smiling up at Rowe. The rest of the group thanked them. Rowe bowed down towards the group, turned around and disappeared down the stairs. You may want to try his desserts. They're very good, said Rowan. reaching for one of the menus that had been left in the center of the table and checking the dessert section. "I think I'll have a warm apple strudel with fresh whipped cream myself," said Rowan, circling the pastry with his pencil and placing it in the rune circle. The familiar puff of smoke enveloped the piece of paper, and he sat back in his chair and looked out over the bar below. "It's nice to be inside warm walls again. It's been a quiet few days by myself, not that I mind it, really. Must say it's pleasant to be back around others again, though," mulled Rowan. "Well, you'll be with us in the group for the rest of the travel, so you won't be by yourself any longer," said Barkland, smiling at Rowan. "Suppose you're right," said Rowan, tipping the remainder of his drink down a start in 2 large gulps and placing the glass mug back on the table. Rose finished her meal, and being the last to do so, and as soon as she placed the silverware on the tableware began to clear itself away, stacking neatly in the center of the table and glided gently up the bar rail and away from sight. Barkland reached into the center of the table and pulled a series of menus from the pile, meaning to eye the desserts again himself. He handed each of the remaining menus to the others, who looked over them as well. Rowan closed the book containing the maps and slid it back over to Barkland, who picked it up and swung it back into the green pouch around his neck with one paw, not taking his eyes from the menu in front of him. Barkland laid the menu on the table and circled one of the choices and placed it into the rune circle, which promptly poofed out of existence. Averly looked up from her menu. "What did you pick?" asked Averly. "Peach custard flan," said Barkland. "Oh," said Rose, making a face, who was having trouble deciding what she wanted herself, but was sure she wasn't going to like that. Rose wasn't a fan of custards. "They are very nice," said Barkland. "I think I'm going to have ginger snaps." "They're usually always a winner," said Samuel, handing his menu to Barkland and placed into the rune circle for him. Rose took a moment, scanning the choices for the third time, and finally decided on a small single serving of carrot cake, circled it, handed the menu to Averly, who handed it to Rowan, who placed it in the rune circle. Averly was the last to choose. She wasn't really in the mood for sweets after seeing Heather, but she didn't want to be the only one not to have something. She found what she was looking for at the bottom of the list of sweets. "Guess I'll get the warmed almond cookies with a scoop of sweet cream ice cream," said Averly, reaching over at Rowan and placing the menu in the rune circle. It disappeared from view. The group sat quietly for a moment, sipping their drinks, watching the commotion below. Animals of all shapes and sizes were eating, chatting, and some were singing and yelling in a jovial fashion with one another. Ro could be seen below chatting up a group of 3 rabbits who were sitting at a booth across from the bar. A tall, thin white rabbit with a large brown spot on his head and deep red eyes was smiling widely and gesturing wildly with both arms. His companions, a shorter brown rabbit whose lower legs were shocking white, and a much younger gray rabbit, also thin with bright blue eyes, were sitting across from the first and smiling as he spoke. Ro was standing in front of their table, leaning on it, and seemed to be deep in thought, listening to them, unmoving. "Look, Ro has some friends," said Rose, motioning to the group below them. The others agreed. They turned their attention back to the table, and Ro tapped his glass mug on the tabletop again. "We're going to have to work quickly," said Ron. "Tomorrow is going to be a very busy day. I'm going to have to come with you and help you get the supplies ready. If I understand how well the folks in these parts work, we should be able to get what we need for everything within the next day or so with little trouble. It does mean, however, that you're going to have to come with me and that we're going to spend the day going all over the town getting things for various purveyors. You'll be tired by tomorrow night." "Our friends will be coming back up from the forest tomorrow night as well," said Barkland. Rowan nodded. "That's good. We'll be able to tell them all about what our plans are," said Rowan. "I think they'll be exhausted from the travel," said Averly. "Probably, but they'll make time for this nonetheless," said Rowan. "I'm sure they will," said Samuel agreeably. Barkland's second dessert was the first to arrive, which it did quietly, sliding up along the rail, coming to a stop in front of him, quivering gently as it came to rest. Custard was topped with fresh slices of peaches and a thick syrup that dripped down the side of the dish. A silver spoon rested gently to the side of it, which Barkland picked up and spooned a mouthful of the flan into his mouth and smiled to himself. "It's absolutely wonderful. Would any of you like to try this?" asked Barkland. "Sure," said Samuel. Barkland passed Samuel the dessert, and Samuel tried it and agreed that it was indeed quite good, and passed it back to him. Barkland probably went back into enjoying his dessert. Soon the other treats arrived, and they were all enjoying themselves. Ron cut into his strudel with his spoon, dolloping a section of cream onto the portion of the strudel he had cut off, and brought it to his mouth, and chewed it slowly, enjoying it. He picked up a menu from the counter and brought a cup of hot cinnamon buttermead to go with his dessert, and placed his order along with a silver coin in the rune circle next to him. As the coin traveled away from him, he turned back to the dessert and cut another piece from the large baked good with his spoon. It was much too large for him to finish by himself, but he was enjoying attempting to finish as much as he could. It was baked for an animal as much larger than mice such as he, and the fillings were wonderfully full of large chunks of warm spiced apple and currants, and mixed well with the flaky crust and fresh cream melting into it. While he ate, it gave him time to think about their travel to the ruins and what he would need to require in the next day. Rowan made a mental checklist, which he had done time and again the days prior, and went over it once again and added in something that came to mind that would be useful. He made a mental note to make sure to have it before they left the city limits. It would make it easier on the wolf pup if they did. Rowan smiled to himself. He was enjoying himself. He had often kept to himself, and he rarely spoke even when he was around others, nary finding the need to speak, but he was enjoying the youth of this group. He looked at their smiling faces, how they laughed and smiled so easily with one another, how they didn't realize just how strong and young they really were, and how much they had ahead of them, and it filled him with a mix of wistful nostalgia and a sense of determination to make sure that they were taken care of while he was there to see to it that they were to be taken care of. He went back to enjoying his dessert and thinking of what was needed for the travel ahead and kept quietly to himself. Rose looked up to him from across the table. "You all right, Rowan?" asked Rose, finishing her cake and placing her napkin on the plate, which left the table in one fluid motion once they realized it was time to leave. "Oh, yes, just thinking of old times and planning for the future," said Rowan. "You'll have to tell us some of your stories," said Barkley, leaning over his plate of half-finished custard and waving his spoon with one paw. "Oh, I will. We'll have plenty of time to speak while we walk. Nothing passes the time like a good story," said Rowan. "Do you have many adventures to tell about?" asked Averly, biting into one of her almond cookies and dabbing at the corner of her mouth with her napkin. "Yes, plenty. Many years of friends and foes gives you stories to tell," said Rowan, as his new drink arrived, sliding to where his now empty glass recited, tapping it gently so that it picked up speed and doubled back and left the table in the same direction that the new drink had arrived. Rowan used 2 paws to pick up the warm drink and sipped at the cream that sat atop the concoction and licked his lips satisfactorily. It suited his dessert perfectly. He took a long gulp from the mug and swallowed. "I'll tell you about my traveling companions from my youth if you like. When we're traveling, if you like," said Rowan. Rose wasn't sure if Rowan realized that he had repeated himself, but smiled regardless. "That'd be lovely," said Rose. Rowan nodded an exaggerated nod and went back to eating his strudel, cutting large chunks from the soft flaky dough with a spoon and accompanying each spoonful with a sip from his new drink. The group sat and finished their desserts together, enjoying their company as much as they were enjoying their sweets. As they were finishing up, Roe came up once again. Roe walked up to Rowan and handed him a piece of paper with a list on it. "Rowan, I've sent some messages. These are the places you'll need to go tomorrow to pick up your supplies. They'll have what you need. There are a few places that Jeffries will have to set up for you tomorrow because I couldn't reach them, but they should be able to help you, and you would be able to find out by early tomorrow morning if they would be able to or not. The ones on this list will be waiting for you, though, and know what you'll need for the length of your trip and have an idea of where you're going. Don't worry about paying for that. There's a tab open for them courtesy of the Amberstones household, so all you need to do is pick them up and get fitted. Most of them are in the eastern part of town. There are a couple of places in the western part of town, so it'll take you most of the day to get what you need. So start early and you should be home by dinner. The trams won't take you everywhere, but so Jeffries has arranged for you to have a personal carriage for the day to get everything sorted. It'll be waiting outside the Amberstones when you get up in the morning," said Roe. "Thank you, Roe. Much appreciated," said Rowan, taking the paper from Roe and folding it in half and placing it in his pocket. Roe looked over the table. "Did you all enjoy your meals?" asked Roe expectantly. "Yes," replied the table unanimously. Roe beamed at them, his large-toed face splitting into a grin. "Glad to hear," said Roe, croaking triumphantly. "It's all been so very tasty," said Barklin. "Very good. Always nice to know when my work is liked," said Roe, turning to look over his bar as it continued to run itself. "We better call it a night since we've got an early morning and a long day ahead of us," said Rowan, gulping down the last of his drink and placing it on the table in front of him. Roe stared at him, his blue eyes unblinking. "That's a good idea. It will be a long day and an even longer travel after, I would wager," said Roe. Roe turned to leave and opened the doors at the top of the stairs, turned to face the table and waited. "You're always welcome here. Thank you for coming. I'm happy you enjoyed the food, and I'm glad I could help you. Please come again," said Roe. Roe closed the door behind him and could be heard trotting down the stairs below him. Rowan backed himself away from the table and jumped up from the chair. "Let's get going, younglings. We'd best get you home at the proper hour so you're able to get a good night's rest. Better to get a night of rest now before the next few weeks of hard ground and lacking meals. You'll want to enjoy that bed you've got. It'll be the best thing you've had in a while, I guarantee it," said Rowan. Right, said Samuel, getting up from the table. The others got up from the table and pushed their chairs in and filed to the door and closed it behind them. They made their way down the stairs into the busy floor and went out through the front door. Everybody tried to look out for Roe to wave goodbye, but couldn't see him for a crowd of boors that were crowding the bar on their way out. The group stepped out into the pavement and started walking towards the tram station a few streets over, passing the oddly shaped shops and restaurants they had passed on the way there. Everybody looked around, wondering if she could see Heather or the others in the crowds walking around. Noticing neither, relaxed and continued on. The ride back to the house was uneventful, and they arrived back under the light of the night's gas lamps. Rowan rode along with them and walked them to the Amberstone's front door. "I'll leave you here, then," said Rowan. "You're not going to come in and stay with us tonight?" asked Rose. Rowan waved her off with one paw. "No, Rose, I've got a place to stay, and I'm looking forward to the warmth of the bed there. I'll be waiting for you tomorrow morning. Don't sleep too late, or we'll be out all day. Pack a lunch. Have a nice night, you all," said Rowan. Rowan walked off down the street. The group watched him for a while until he turned down the corner and disappeared from sight, and then walked up the stairs and knocked on the door. Jeffries answered the door and let them in. "Welcome back. Have a good meal?" asked Jeffries, stepping back into the hallway so they could enter. "Yes," said Samuel. "The Toadstool and Row are great. The magic that runs that place is fantastic. The food is to die for," said Barklin. Jeffries beamed at them. "I thought you would enjoy it. Rowe works quite hard to make sure that the food is there is as good as it possibly could be. Did he take you to his private table?" asked Jeffries as they walked into the hallway, Jeffries closing the door behind them. "Yes," said Rose. "The view over the bar is unparalleled." "That it is," said Jeffries. The group walked into the hallway and up to the stairs leading to their rooms. "I think it's best if we were to call it a night, since we've got a long day ahead of us," said Averly. "Oh, yes, I received a message from Mr. Rowan on Rose's behalf. The carriage will be here first thing in the morning. Up you go. If you need anything, please feel free to come down and call on me. I'll be available in the kitchen most of the night, as I'll be preparing the house for the young Amberstone's arrival tomorrow night. Here's me thinking I would be able to go to bed early tonight. I'd almost forgotten how much work goes into making all the food that goes into feeding 2 dozen hungry mouths," said Jeffries. "Do you want any help with that?" asked Rose, turning and looking down from above the first flight of stairs. "Oh, no, dear. That's just part of my job, and I've got a few tricks up my sleeve to get it sorted quickly. Rose's not the only one to know a few food spells, and it's just best to get it sorted tonight, so I've got the rest of the day to make sure all the odds and ends are taken care of before they arrive. I must admit I'm a little worried about being ready for them, but it'll be good to see them again," said Jeffries, chewing his lower lip. "They'll be glad to see you too," said Rose. "Oh, yes, I'm sure they will," said Averly. Jeffrey's demeanor brightened, and he walked down the hall and into the kitchen, the door swinging shut behind him. They made their way up the flight of stairs and came to their rooms and wished each other a good night. "See you in the morning, lady," said Barklin as he walked to the bedroom door, turned the knob, and entered his room. "Night," offered Rose as she entered the opposite side of the hallway. Samuel waved to Averly, and Averly waved back as they followed behind and closed their doors for the night. They slept soundly that night and woke with the morning's first light breaking through the curtains of each of the rooms. Hi everybody. So I've made a new store called animalquest.shop, and I made my first shirt, Barklin Reading, at the Amberstone's house, and I would ask that you go and buy those there. I'll make a few bucks each time you buy something from there, and I have men, women's, baby clothing, and buttons, as well as other accessories, including dog bandanas, which I think are pretty cool, and I'll be adding more merch every week or two for that store as the stories progress and the sequels are written and read. I'll do the same for Divergent Mind. The link again is animalquest.shop. The link for Divergent Mind will be divergentmind.shop as well. Thank you so much. Jay. Okay, well, I'm taking a break, so I might as well do some ads. This is my first one, so bear with me. So, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. That's pretty cool. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And all you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Please visit anchor.fm/divergentmind to leave a message so that I may get back to you. Thank you. Have a nice day. So I just signed up for Anchor's funding platform for the podcasters. It seems like a better deal than Patreon at the moment. So I would ask that you click the button that says donate and maybe donate $1 or $5 or $10 a month to us so that we can keep going. And I can produce almost daily or daily podcasts or more in the way that I've been going. And I'll produce book after book after book after book, and then I'll read through them. And I'll keep doing that until I can't see an end to it. It's so much fun. It really is. So please go to anchor.fm/divergentmind and click the donate button and that'll help me out a whole bunch. Thank you so much, Jay. Okay, so I just wanted to let you know that I have a YouTube channel called Taught Myself, and that I've decided to start selling merch already with a phrase that my brother showed me saying, "My disability is invisible," of which I made a hat for myself. So I decided to make hats, shirts, hoodies, for both men and women on Spreadshirt.com. All you have to do is search for "My Disability is Invisible." It's in green, and that's mine. You'll know it's me because when you click the sale icon, the same little Divergent Mind icon comes up. And I hope you'll support me. I make about $5 per shirt or per sale. Everything else goes to Spreadshirt. But that's okay because it's still a better deal than a lot of other places. And I really hope you'll support me. Come check me out on the YouTube. Teach me how to do that properly so I can have a community there too. And I await your response. Have a lovely day. Jay.
Hey people, take a listen to the Divergent Mind podcast. You get both insight into living with a serious mental illness and get to listen to a lovely tale about a journey cute little animals need to take. Don't miss out, and remember, divergent minds don't need to think alike.
Please go to ratethispodcast.com/divergentmind and tell me what you think. Thank you very much. Yours truly, Jay.